Hello, this is Dr. Bradley Wolfe. I'm going over Chapter 7 in the Public Speaking Project on supporting your ideas. So this is a video overview of some of the main ideas on how to support your ideas. So it starts here in the introduction, talking about the benefits of using multiple different sources, right? You want statistics, you want facts, you want testimony as well. So the more variety of sources you can use is going to give you a stronger speech. So if you just have statistics, right? Statistics are great, but they're not great by themselves, right? You want to mix in statistics with other information. Some people are very numbers oriented. Some people are more visual learners. Some people like those stories and getting engaged with a story. So it's good to have a mix of different types of information when giving your speech. That way you can engage all different types of people, and it's multiple ways of boosting your credibility, right? You're trying to boost your credibility in the speech at the end of the day. So so it recommends using multiple types, and this chapter goes over those multiple types of resources that you can use and where to find them. So first he talks about personal and professional knowledge. So first, you can use personal testimony. If you're connected to the topic some way, absolutely use your personal testimony. Share with the audience what you know. Why are you an expert on the topic? Again, you don't want to have your story be the only information you're sharing. You also want to mix it in with other sources. But personal testimony, it gets people, right? It helps that pathos, that emotional appeal, and connects them and says, hey, this person that actually lived this. I once listened to a speaker who she was a survivor of the Holocaust. And so her personal testimony was super valuable then. Just being someone who's been in a concentration camp, she had a lot of great information, story to share that was very valuable for me to listen to. You don't need to be a Holocaust survivor to be a credible speaker, though. So if you're talking about, your personal experience with pet ownership, right? I have a cat here named Amber who likes to interrupt me when I'm recording myself on Zoom. But that personal testimony, if I'm talking about pet ownership, that can be very valuable. So it can be small little things like that. You may even pick your topic based on what you have some personal experience with. Even if your personal experience is just saying, hey, I did some research on this topic because it interests me, you can frame that in a way that can help boost your credibility to some extent. Another type of testimony would be interviews. So this is, you can interview lay testimony, people in your life, people that you know. You can interview professionals as well, some people who are recognized authority on a topic. And these interviews are one way of gathering information. You may be able, with the internet and web, you may be able to interview people from a distance if you have some connection to them, but you may be able to interview local experts as well. So it's good to figure out a time and place and a method for you to do the interview, right? If you're going to be doing over Zoom, you certainly can record it, or another video sharing platform that you can record that interview. If you're interviewing someone in person, you may just bring out your phone and put it on record. Again, get their permission before you record them. But that can help you with any direct quotes they may have and to refresh your memory on what was said. It's good to prepare the person you're interviewing beforehand by giving them some general interview questions. You don't need to share everything with them beforehand, because again, you may have follow-up questions or just other things you're interested in that come up during the conversation. But if you have questions beforehand, that can be very helpful for them to make the best use of both of your time. So it talks about also taking some notes during the interview. So again, even if you're recording, and it's good to take notes to say, hey, here's where in the interview we talked about this. We'll go look back at this information, right? Or this may want to include in my final speech. That can give you a lot of great information as well and keep everything organized. And then thank them, of course, thank them after the interview for interviewing someone and taking their time. Make sure to thank them. You may even invite them to your speech so they can hear the speech that their information kind of supported. So that can be appropriate. And if you have any follow-up questions or contact, establish that during the interview as well. Now, not everyone's going to interview someone. Not everyone has personal experience that they can relate to a topic. So what most people are going to do, whether they're students or professionals preparing a speech, is they're going to have to do some research, right? They're going to have to do some research. One of the ways is through library resources. We have public libraries all across the United States, and many places around the world have public libraries. But often if you're going to school, you have a school library that you can take advantage of. School libraries are great because often they will have librarians. Even public libraries have librarians, but school librarians especially know how to help with research projects. So if you're looking for something specific, you're going to, may be able to take advantage of those of those experts that are there. They're experts at knowing how to do academic research, right? Academic research and how to support academic arguments. Public librarians know how to do research as well. They may be just very interested in books and knowing certain research or certain platforms, but those school librarians as well. They're all experts, right? Tap into the expertise, get some help with your speech, right? Nothing wrong with getting help from a tutor, or a professional, as long as they're not doing it for you, right? There's different, we'll talk later about plagiarism, but you definitely can get help and support doing research and getting pointed in the right direction to get the information that you need. So this section talks about books, it talks about periodicals, and also talks about databases. So books are often what comes to mind when we picture a library. The shelves are full of books. Great place to get some general knowledge. Libraries catalog the books, they organize them well. Often nowadays, libraries can ship books from one another, so even if they don't carry it, they can get it from another library for you. I know in my local community that both the public libraries and the school libraries are connected, that work together in some ways, and are able to share books with one another. So they do that in order to get books to people. Even if you don't have a library that's accessible to you, if you live in a rural area, many public libraries will ship their books to rural folks to make sure you have access, the same access as everyone else. I live in a rural community, and there's actually a book bus that comes. It comes, I don't know how frequently it comes, but there's a book bus that's parked over by City Hall once in a while. So definitely we try to make sure books are accessible to people all across the United States. And again, depending on where you are in the world, you'll have different access as well. But definitely in the United States and in my local community, we have books, we have book buses, we can get them shipped to us. So a lot of great resources available. And of course, the internet, there are online books. People buy books on Amazon and just read them on their phone or tablet nowadays. So there's a lot of different ways to access books and have them accessible to you. Now, if you're just giving a speech that's only a few minutes long, you may not want to read an entire book just for one speech. But if you already have read the book or we're reading it anyway, that's when you may take advantage of books. But they're not necessarily the first place I recommend my students to go to, or even in my professional career, I haven't always gone to books as my first resource. If I've read them already, then I can incorporate them. But I'm often not going to read an entire book just for one speech. A second option would be a periodical. Again, these are available at many libraries. Just to know, different, more general topics books are thicker, so they have more information. Periodicals, usually are going to be, new. It may come out monthly, but definitely at a specific interval. Predictable interval could be weekly, could be monthly, could be quarterly, to give information and have a variety of articles related to whatever subject that they cover. Sometimes these are scholarly research journals, which are a little different. Sometimes they're just general interest periodicals. So general interest periodicals include magazines and newspapers and have a wide variety of knowledge to really put information in a larger cultural context. Scholarly research journals are peer reviewed. You may have to have access through your library in order to access scholarly research journals, although some are becoming publicly available and getting down those paywalls. I know that's definitely a debate in academia, whether those paywalls are equitable, and whether research should be free, right? Research should be freely available for people. So more scholarly journals are actually giving their information publicly available. I'm the editor of the State Journal for Communication Studies right now in Minnesota. And so ours is just publicly available for people. We publish once a year, so that's our regular interval that we publish on. But those are different resources that you can use. Now, scholarly journals are normally going to be looked at as more credible sources than just a general interest periodical. But depending on your topic, you certainly can use both. Again, it's good to have a mix of different sources when giving a speech, when giving a presentation. Now, if you're working on your doctorate, you probably want a lot of scholarly research. If you're working on a master's degree, you probably want scholarly research. If you're working on an undergraduate speech, general interest periodicals are good to keep in the mix too, right? They're perfectly fine and have a lot of decent information in them. In the communication studies, the National Communication Studies Association has a kind of a general interest periodical. They just do a few different, again, they're publicly available, a few different stories related to things, kind of current events that are related to communication studies and putting a communication studies lens on them. So you certainly can access those. I know I allow my students to do there's extra credit opportunity. So if you're one of my students watching this, look for that extra credit opportunity in D2L, where you can use the National Communication Association's database in order to get that information. And you can do a little one-page review on it. Then there are full text databases, which is the last one here, in this chapter or this section, talking about, instead of looking for print copies, you look for them online. That's what I've always done, right? I'm fairly young. You go for the online databases. Once in a while, I've had to find one that's only has it in print. But like I said, I'm the editor of a journal. We're fully online. We don't even print out the publications. So you can have a full text database just to get the information. And when you're searching, you can click saying, hey, I want it fully available online, right? That's one of the options you can click if you're searching in the library database. And then next here, so that talks about libraries. This is just general internet resources. Certainly you can access your library or a public library from your computer. But this is just generally what does everyone have available to them, even if you're a professional in the workplace and not connected to a library, a specific library. You can use a search engine. A lot of people use Google. There's also Bing, Yahoo, Ask. Google is, it's even a word nowadays. You Google something, so Google's the go-to for that. You can search through to look for information on your topic. Now, when you're Googling something, you're going to have to do a little bit more work making sure that it's a credible source. If it's from the library, it's more likely to be credible. Again, you're going to want to check that and verify that it's credible information. But Google, anything can pop up, right? So you want to be careful with how you're searching, the search terms you're using, and then also what sort of websites you're looking at when gathering information. So it says here that sponsored links are going to be pop up first before what things would come up naturally. So you're going to want to be careful about that as well. So when you're defining search terms, it may be good for you to look broadly at the topic. Like it says, if you're looking at revolutions in the Middle East, you may want to Google broad information about revolutions or the Middle East. But once you get more specific, you may have a specific term that you're looking for. After you read your first few articles, you may narrow down those search terms and look for something different. So if you're outlining your speech and saying, hey, I'm missing information here, the problem, if it's a problem solution format, I have the problem identified well, but I don't have my solution as strong, then you can search specifically for that. So you're going to want to look at what search terms are you using. And this goes through the Boolean operators, so just different ways to search for multiple things at once. Again, Middle East or Iran. So you can use or to search for either of the terms and see what comes up first. So revolutions in the Middle East or revolutions in Iran. So that was something you can do. You can do and to make sure that it says and plus by indicating that you're interested in the relationship between two terms and how things come together, or not here. To show that you're not interested in a term that may often appear with your with your first term, and so that's something to keep in mind. And then quotation marks if you want, say, hey, I want this specific word in there, and I'm looking for this specific phrase. You can use quotation marks. There's a lot of different ways to use Boolean search terms. And so what I recommend is go to your local librarian, your school librarian, and get some information on it, because they're going to be able to help you out more. The next here is Google. We already talked about Google, but again, just Googling something for a wide variety of information here. There's different types of Google, so they're not all the same. You can do Google Scholar, you can do Google Books, you can do Google Images. So there's different tabs you can go to within that Google domain. Google Scholar is going to have more scholarly information. I don't think it's as good as school libraries that I've used. Google Scholar has been a little bit more difficult, and you don't always have access to it. Like I said, many of them are behind paywalls. You do it through your school library, it's much easier to say, hey, the library is going to give you resources that you already have access to, or they can request access to them for you. Whereas Google Scholar, you may have to pay to get some of those, and that's what I don't like as much about it. But it is available for you as a resource, and a lot of students do like it. Use Google Scholar to find more credible information than just using Google by itself. Google Scholar usually has more credible information. Google Books, again, if you're looking for a book, Google Books can help you search for it. Again, you can use a library to search for books as well. So again, if you want to use Google Books, you certainly can. Google Images is something that I've actually used in giving a speech. If you're putting together a PowerPoint presentation, you're going to go to Google Images and look for some visual aids in order to prove your point. Now, you're going to want to be careful that these visual aids, if you're going to use them outside of a, just a classroom presentation, you'll want to make sure you have access to using them. You don't have to pay money to use images. A lot of images, even if you can find them online and kind of put them into your presentation, you may still have a copyright violation if you use them for a public presentation. So you want to be careful. Just make sure you're avoiding any sort of copyright. And then there are other websites you can go on to find free images that are freely available. But if it's for a classroom presentation, right, there's some academic flexibility with using images online, as long as it's kept in that classroom and not posted somewhere online. Fair use is what that's called, academic fair use. Schools can use schools for learning purposes. You can use some images and information, but we're going to want to cite it still, right? So academic fair use is different than plagiarism, where you're using things without proper citation. So you'll want to cite where you found that image and make sure you're citing it appropriately. But you can use it because you're citing it, right? You're citing it in your presentation. Then there's a lot of websites that are going to come up if you're doing a Google search. So again, looking what is a credible website and what is not. Again, you may want to have your audience in mind. What's my audience going to view as credible? If it has the website has a weird name, or if it's just a blog, how are you going to make it credible? If you say, hey, this is a credible website, but it may not appear at first glance to be credible, how you cite your source can make it sound credible, right? You're going to want to frame it saying, hey, this is someone's blog, but this person, the blog is written by a medical doctor who's been practicing on, whatever I'm giving my speech on. There's whatever, I don't know. It's a hair doctor and hair regrowth. So if you want, this person's a medical doctor on hair regrowth, and they've been doing it, practicing for 20 years. Maybe a personal blog, but it could be the blog of an expert. So how are you going to show that that person has the expertise and credibility to speak on your topic? Then there's government documents. There's also government websites. They're seen as more credible information. So if you look at .gov, .edu, .org, those are usually seen as more credible websites than the .com, right? .coms can be credible, but it depends on, again, what your topic is and what information you're finding online. So you're going to want to look at that. If you can find some government documents related to your topic, those are always great to keep in mind as well. But it can be, difficult reading through legalese or different codes or statutes or legal documents. So again, depending on how accessible, this information is to you and how accessible using it would be for your audience, you're going to want to think about it. But again, it's good to have a variety of different sources so you can meet the needs of different audience members, because most people are giving their speeches to a diverse group of individuals. And last here, I think this is last, talks about, in this section at least, talks about evaluating your sources. So as I said, there's the .com versus .org, .gov, .edu. That's just looking at the website, pretty easy way of evaluating information. But you're going to want to take time to evaluate the information to see if it's credible. So if you're finding it in multiple sources, again, comparing different sources to each other, that's why most speeches require multiple sources to be used. So use these sources to compare to each other, and make sure you're getting the same information. And if you're just searching for that information, you're just going to find that one perspective. So it's good to look for counterpoints as well. And even in your speech, give those counterpoints. Say, hey, here's one side of the debate and here's the other. That boosts your credibility and shows you've done really good research to find quality information from both sides of the debate. If there is a debate on the topic, right? If there is controversy, it depends on what your topic is. But it's good to have different types of information and check the credibility of the information you're sharing. So it talks here about biases, it talks here about source credibility. You can read through this. There's plenty of other information you can get on making sure you're finding credible sources. But again, you're going to want to do some sort of critical reading in order to ensure that this quality information you're sharing with your audience members. All right, now we're into citing sources and avoiding plagiarism. This is my least favorite topic, but it's one of the most important topics that I cover in any class that I teach, because every semester I'm writing reports about students plagiarizing, students using information that's not their own and trying to submit that as part of their assignment, right? And I hate doing it. And I tell my students every semester, you're watching this, make sure don't plagiarize information, right? but it always happens. And I always have to write up a report, and I try to be very nice about it. And I talk to the student, give them resources to help them avoid plagiarism in the future. But every semester, I have at least one student who's turning an assignment that's not their own. So before we get to plagiarizing, well, they talk about style guides. So there's MLA, there's APA, there's the Chicago style. So depending on what your discipline you're in or what your teacher prefers, you may use these different styles. They're mostly used in academia, right? They're academic styles. The Associated Press style is used in news articles, so they have a different style themselves. Communication studies often uses APA, so I recommend my students use APA, and I find it easier than the MLA format. I certainly know MLA, and if students want to turn something in an MLA format, that's fine as well, if that's what their discipline is. I teach gen ed classes, so sometimes students may have a specific style they use in their major, or where they want to go. So MLA is fine with me. Chicago style, I don't use Chicago style as much. It's not as common. Normally in communication studies, we'll use APA first, or MLA as a secondary type. If people want to, we kind of bridge the social sciences and the humanities. So we'll use MLA and APA, but mostly it's APA as the standard in communication studies. There's lots of style guides online that you can find too. I like Purdue OWL, OWL, Purdue OWL. They have some great resources on all these styles. So whatever style that you need for your class or your assignment, they have a style guide for you. I recommend using the APA style guide for communication studies, at least. So plagiarism, again, my least favorite topic. Deep breath. It's going to be okay, right? We're going to talk about this. We'll get through it. Plagiarism is the act of presenting someone else's work or ideas on your own. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes it's unintentional. And most times when I'm dealing with plagiarism, it's unintentional. Students don't know the rules around plagiarism, and they get in trouble for it. So if you're using a source, make sure to cite the source. Make sure to say, hey, I'm using a source here. Don't just find a speech online and copy a piece of it and throw it into your speech. I've had students do that, right? They get in trouble with it. The plagiarism checkers find it. Sometimes I see it and I say, hey, something's wonky here. And I look for it and can find it myself. So that's pretty clearly cheating. You're taking part of it and using somebody else's work as your own, just putting it into your speech without any citations. Sometimes people take an entire outline that somebody else made. Maybe a student who previously took the class and submit it. I've had that happen once. It wasn't even, their friend didn't even take my class. It was a couple of years ago. There was a different teacher. It'll be fine. So they submitted it for my class. I was able to figure out pretty quickly that it wasn't for my class because they did things differently than I teach them. I'm like, they did things in a very specific way. It was a very well done outline, but it's not the way that I teach outlines. And so I'm like, something's wrong here. And then I was able to do a little bit of research and figure out, okay, who was teaching during the summer of, when it was done. I could figure out the date on the document. I could, find other information to help me figure out where it came from. So I've been in school for a very long time. Your teachers have been in school for a very long time, right? So they know all these tricks. They know all these tricks, and they know how to catch them. So don't be cheating. To me, I always tell my students, if you need more time, reach out to me, right? Don't plagiarize. Oftentimes students will plagiarize or take something else out of a rush because they don't have the time. Here, let me work with you. Let me work with you and help you be successful. I'd much rather have you reach out and say, hey, I need to turn this in late. My life's too busy. I'm very stressed out. I'd rather work with you and give you an accommodation and support than have you turn in something that's not your own. Because again, that's not going to help you learn, right? Turning something in late, you're going to learn. Turning something in that's not your own, maybe you'll learn because you get a 0 on it. Maybe you'll learn not to do that again, but you're not going to learn how to give a speech or create a speech or make an outline or whatever it is. So make sure you're citing your sources. The other type of plagiarism that students don't often know about is self-plagiarism. So you cannot take a speech that you wrote for one class and give it in another class without permission of both instructors. So again, even though it's your own work, each assignment has different criteria, and it's each supposed to be a different type of learning. You're not supposed to just do the same thing you did in the past, right? You're taking a public speaking class right now, so you're supposed to learn new information on how to give a speech, even if you've taken one in the past. You're supposed to apply that new information and that greater knowledge to make a better speech. So that's one of the reasons why it is. Now, if you're taking 2 classes concurrently and you have a similar assignment in both classes, sometimes instructors will work out, how can you splice it up or use some of the same information in each of them? that's when I can see, again, instructors giving permission and saying, yeah, that sounds okay. But again, it depends on the personality of the instructors. It depends on, your idea and how similar the assignments are. But always reach out, communicate before you make a mistake, right? Teach communication classes. I always tell people to communicate. So here it shows the difference between written citations and verbal citations. Now, I always tell students, it's public speaking, not public reading. If you're reading an essay that you wrote, the essay is not going to be written in the way that people speak, right? They're different. Same with citations. If you can't just say, quote, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life, Jobs 2005, right? That's not how we talk. We don't just say Jobs 2005, like, it's weird, right? That just comes off as weird and inauthentic. Whereas in an oral citation, you can do, in his 2005 commencement address at Stanford University, Steve Jobs said, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life, right? See, that is natural. That is how people talk. It may sound formal, maybe more formal than you prefer to talk, but it is a way of talking, right? Whereas they're saying Jobs 2005, right? No one does that. So again, figuring out how to verbally cite it. And you can see here, it's boosting the credibility. So it gives the person's full name, it gives when it happened. It says, hey, this happened at Stanford University. That helps boost the quote's credibility with the information. And here again, putting the quote in context. So Michael Pollan offers 3 basic guidelines for healthy eating in his book, In Defense of Food. He advises readers to eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So again, it's boosting the credibility, saying, hey, this isn't a book. This is what the quote means. It's putting it in context. So you'll want to make sure these quotes are put into context if you're using direct quotes. Even if you're not using direct quotes, you still want to put the information that you're sharing in context and saying, where did it come from, right? So you want to use these types of verbal citations. You don't just say Jobs 2005 or Pollan 2009. You give the context for where you did your information, even if it's not a direct quote. These are examples are direct quotes, but even if it's not a direct quote, if it's an indirect quote, or if you're paraphrasing information, you're still going to want to use those verbal citations. So pay attention to how you verbally cite information. So this chapter covers how to convince an audience that you're a credible speaker. You may share personal examples from your life. You may interview people. You may read books, periodicals, peer-reviewed research. You can look on Google. You can look at your school library, wherever you want to find information. And then once you have a lot of information, you're going to cite it properly in your speech, right? You're going to create the speech on your own and share information. So again, just try to be very thoughtful on how you create your speech and take your time to do some good research. Make sure you're using credible resources with good information. Now, this chapter is 20 pages long, but each of these different topics you could go into so much more depth on. We could talk a lot more about plagiarism. We could talk a lot more how to assess whether a source is credible. We can talk a lot more about all these different research strategies we can go in so much more depth about. So this is really just scratching the surface of what you need to know in order to support the ideas in your speech. Hopefully you found this video helpful to explain the information that the chapter covers. And I always tell students, reach out if you need any help. There are lots of people out there who are willing to help you and want you to be successful, whether it's a librarian, a tutor, your teacher. We're all here to support you. We're all here to support your success in class. And especially with doing research and citing things properly, if you don't know, ask, right? It's best to ask. It's best to get the information that you need, and we are glad to help. So thank you for watching my presentation, and always feel free to reach out if you need anything.